Ronald and Nancy Reagan were both incredibly influential figures of the 1980s and beyond, each having been well known for a number of different accomplishments. Ronald Reagan was first put in public office when he was elected governor of California in 1966, beating the Democratic challenger and incumbent, Edmund G. Brown, with about 58% of the vote. As governor, he pushed for major welfare reform, tightening eligibility requirements for aid, and increasing aid for the truly needy people of his state. He sought re-election in 1970, being re-elected with 53% of the vote. Later on in the decade, Reagan ran an unsuccessful campaign for the Republican nomination for president. His fortunes turned around, however, in 1980 when he was voted the GOP nominee and with George H.W. Bush as his running mate, won 51% of the popular vote and 489 of the 538 delegates from 44 of the 50 states, making him the 40th President of the United States. Shortly after becoming president, in March 1981, John Hinckley Jr. attempted to assassinate Reagan by gunshot, but Reagan soon recovered from the injuries sustained during the attempt on his life. Later that year, Reagan appointed Sandra Day O'Connor as Supreme Court Justice, making him the first president to appoint a woman to the court. During his presidency, Reagan was in favor of tax breaks for businesses to allow them to invest in growth to jumpstart the economy. He also passed a bill which implemented a 3-year reduction in income taxes, putting more money back in the pockets of consumers for them to spend. This trickle-down economic plan was commonly referred to as Reaganomics. As well as this, Reagan also increased defense spending and made cuts in many domestic programs. In 1984, Reagan was re-elected for a second term in office, this time by an even wider margin, with 58% of the votes. He won 525 out of 538 delegates and only lost to his competitor, Walter Mondale, in his home state of Minnesota by about 4,000 votes. This is the largest margin of votes ever won by any U.S. president in history. Early in his second term, President Reagan began to focus more so on the Soviet Union and ending the Cold War. In 1985, Reagan began negotiating nuclear arms agreements with Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev. These talks would eventually lead to perhaps Reagan's most famous speech as president at the Berlin Wall, which separated communist Berlin from democratic Berlin.
There is one sign the Soviets can make that would be unmistakable, that would advance dramatically the cause of freedom and peace. General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
This speech, along with the following meetings between the leaders of the two countries, eventually led to the end of the Cold War, yet another one of Reagan's great achievements in office. While Ronald Reagan was busy governing the nation, his wife, First Lady Nancy Reagan, had some projects of her own which she took on.
In the next few months, the motion picture industry and theater owners will be bringing you a series of messages like the one you just saw. I don't think anybody will miss the point. The thrill can kill. The drug dealers need to know that we want them out of our schools, neighborhoods, and our lives. And the only way to do that is to take the customers away from the product. Say no to drugs and say yes to life.
Of course, your local drug pusher may tell you a little something different about these drugs. And who you believe is up to you. But then again, if you go ahead and try them, at least it won't be out of ignorance. Just stupidity. What would I do if someone offered me these drugs? I'd tell them to take a hike.
This public service announcement by Nancy and actor Clint Eastwood is one of many public service announcements produced by Reagan in her anti-drug abuse campaign titled Just Say No. Another project she took on was the renovation of the White House, which was in desperate need of repair. However, rather than using public funds to renovate the building, she sought out private donors for the project. This renovation, along with the Just Say No campaign, are only a couple of the accomplishments she achieved during her time as the nation's First Lady. Both Ronald and Nancy Reagan were incredible people, and both made a lasting impact on the United States of America.